we're going to delete the second copies, the bottom copies layer mask. Okay, now we're going to go into our filter blur lens effect, lens blur, sorry. And you'll see that remember that we turned invert off here, which is what I want. Now we're going to play with our focal distance again for this image because it's going to be different from the one we just did before. So again, I'm just going to start pulling it up until I get things in focus that I want and things out of focus that I don't. Okay, so this is, again, we can see that our angel statue here in the foreground is in focus, but our columns here in the background are out of focus. That column is more out of focus than this one here. We pulled up our radius to 35. We worked on 15 before, but that was because our normal Z depth pass was inverted, and we're not doing that now. So a higher value would probably work better for us. Again, turn preview on and off to get an idea of what it's doing. And you can see our angel stays in focus, but our background becomes out of focus. And the further back the background, the more out of focus it is. The closer to the camera, the clearer it is. And that's basically what depth of field is. So. I might pull this one back to about 30 on our radius, so it won't be quite so dramatic. And that's good, so let's call that okay. Now again, all we need to do is to see that depth of field is to delete our layer mask here. And if I turn it on and off, you can see the depth of field popping on in the background here. Let's turn our levels back on. Okay, so we've done that one, we've done this one, but I do want to draw levels on this image as well. So again, in our adjustment stack, I'm going to put a levels down. I'm going to pull it up just a bit. Up. This is not what I want. My mistake. I don't think we did. Did we do a levels or did we do a contrast? Yeah, no, we did a brightness contrast. We're going to do a brightness contrast again. I'm just going to delete that levels layer. Sniper Echo says, I don't know about anything else, but it would make one hell of a wallpaper. Yeah, it would. I guess it would. Hopefully. We're trying to create a pretty picture. And my reason for creating these renders is, like you guys know, I'm going to be selling this model online. So my whole point of creating these renders is to show people what the model looks like, what the textures look like, and to help sell the model. So, but it would make a good wallpaper. Let's do a brightness contrast. That's the one I wanted to do. Now we're probably going to have it slightly different from this one, but I'm just checking the values I used on this one, which were 20 and 30. We might go 25 here on the contrast. Yeah, we'll go 30 and 25 here for the brightness and contrast on this image. Color correction, the other color correction I want to do here, we do have this bush in the background. Let me have a look at that. The easiest way to find that bush, because these renders are quite dark here, will be to go into your channel and look through your channel, and you should be able to spot it quite easily. It's that one there, because you'll see the white against the black more easily than you'll see the rendered image in your layer. So say I want to make a color adjustment to that bush in the background. Select the alpha, the layer for your alpha for that bush, and that little dotted circle down the bottom will allow you to make a selection based on that alpha. Then I'm going to go back into my layer. Always though, make sure you go back to your RGB. You don't want to be copying black and white. So select the layer, copy a selection, go back to your RGB, then jump back into your layer, and that's made a selection on just that bush. I'm going to go Control C to copy it, but I'm going to go Edit, Paste Special, and Paste in Place. Don't do that. It's still using my Z-depth pass. Make sure you select the layer, the color channel underneath before you do a copy paste. So let's just do that again. Select the bush, select the layer for the alpha for the bush, make a selection, jump back to our RGB, make sure we're on our color channel here. Now do a Control C and do an Edit, Paste Special, and Paste in Place. Now you'll notice nothing has really happened, and that's because it's pasted it directly over that bush. But if I do an adjustment on that now, so let's go to, now I know I told you don't do these adjustments through here, always do them here. I'm going to do it here just to show you guys exactly what that will do, because I don't really want to do any color adjustment on that bush in the background here in this image. So adding an adjustment in the stack here is not really necessary. I'm just going to do it here and I'll do an undo. But if I do say let's do a levels. Remember, I'm only working on a copy of that bush in the background. If I pull it back to black, you can see how crisp that alpha copy is, and that's the advantage of using View to save out your object masks. You can get a really crisp alpha map to work with. But like I said, I'm not going to be doing any adjustments to that bush, so I don't think I am. We can do a color balance on it. Let's have a look. Say I wanted to make the bush look a little bit greener. Yeah, object masks really are. I mean, one of the things when you're doing any compositing, because that's why a lot of guys that do compositing work or composition, live action composition, like to use View because of these object masks, because when you're doing any composition work in Photoshop or After Effects or whatever program you use, it can be really difficult to isolate just an object that you want to work on from the rest of the objects in the scene. And by doing your renders in Eon View and turning on multi-pass rendering and having it save out object masks, it makes it really easy then to actually select those specific parts of the scene that you want to adjust or change or whatever. And like I said, that's why a lot of concept artists like to use View to render up their backgrounds, even if they're not intending to do any sort of animation, and they're going to composite live action footage over the top of their background, they still like to use View to create the background because of all these object masks. It makes their job much easier than trying to do it either by hand in Photoshop or some other way. Because you're never going to get as clean a mask as you can get getting View to do it at render time. Let's go to our highlights. I know it's subtle and it's probably difficult for you guys to see, but it's that bush in the background that I'm working on, that little bush in the corner here. If I go dramatic with the color adjustment, you can see what it's doing. Like, we don't want a red bush, but that's the bush I'm working on there in the background. And I just want to blend it in a little better to the actual background image itself. Like that. Now, if once you've done your adjustment, this is the other thing about working with object masks. We did our adjustment to our color here, but we think, oh, maybe I preferred it the way it was. All you have to do is turn the layer off. And you see our bush goes back to exactly the way it was. I'm going to turn it back on, and we go back to our greener bush. Now, I don't like this purpley coloured bush to begin with. And the purple is actually, it's got pink leaves, they're flowering plants in the background. Yeah, as Sniper Echo says, you can imagine the time saved on complex scenes would be enormous, and it is, it really is. Because working on a complex scene where you've got to do a lot of adjustment on whatever it is you're working on, having these individual object masks that you can turn on and off is really handy. It's handy not just for color correction, for all sorts of things. Having a really good object mask can make your life much easier if you're doing any sort of CG work. Now, I don't like the original here, let's say, and I don't like the new green color here, the color adjustment, it's too bright. We can leave it on, but we can jump up to our opacity tab here and we can start pulling it back. So that's with none, that's with all. And I do this quite often. I'll start pulling back my color adjustment to blend them together a bit better. So I get a good blend between the two of them until I see in the image the way I like it to look, the color I'm after. So again, I'll zoom in here, and this is with it no color adjustment, this is with full color adjustment. I'm just going to pull back on my opacity until I get a color on that bush that I like the look of. Remembering I'm trying to blend the bush here into the background. Something like that. Again, if I turn it off, you'll see, looking at this bush here, once I turn it off, it'll go back to the original. And turning it back on just helps to blend that bush into our background a bit better. That's really the only part of this image that I want to do any color adjustment on. So let's move on to another image now. Let's see, which one will we do next? Let's do camera 4. Yeah, let's do camera 4. So the same deal again. We're going to start by going up to our Z depth and turning that on. We're going to do an invert on our Z depth. We're going to throw our levels down. Pull it right back. No problem, Sniper Echo. We don't really need to make any more adjustments. I'm not seeing any banding happening in the background here, so that should be fine. So now that we've made our adjustments to our Z depth, I'm going to do a Control A to select everything, Control C to copy. Select our color channel, and we're going to turn off our Z depth and our levels now. Again, we're going to go layer, layer mask, and reveal all. Jump into our channel, turn on our layer mask channel, and Control B to copy our Z depth pass in. We can turn it off. Again, we're going to make a copy of that color channel, duplicate. We're We're going to delete the Z depth from the bottom one though. The layer mask actually from the bottom one. Select a copy with the layer mask, and again we're going to go filter, blur and lens blur. Make sure our layer mask is always selected as our source, and make sure invert is turned off. And let's start playing with our blur focal distance again to get a look that we're after. Because remember, it's really going to be dependent on the actual objects in the scene, so you can never really use the same one for every scene, every object, every render. You see, the further down towards this end I pull it, the more it blurs the foreground and the less it blurs the background. So we're going to have to stick to the top end here, because we want the foreground in focus with the background blurred. Once you start going too high, you're going to start blurring the foreground as well though, so you've got to be careful. I'm going to keep pulling it back until my angel statue comes into focus the way I like it. That's what I like. She's in focus, but you see that the dome in the background behind her is out of focus. As far as blur amount goes, that's not too bad. Let's turn our preview on and off to compare the blur, how much depth of field blurring is happening. Again, you want it to be subtle but noticeable. And that looks pretty good. Let's go OK to that. Again, you're not going to see it once you go back until you delete that layer mask. So just select the layer mask and delete it. And if you turn our color copy on top or on and off, we can see the depth of field happening in the background behind her. So that's off and that's on. Off, on. So just a subtle depth of field happening in the background. I'm going to take a quick break for a couple of minutes, guys. I just want to grab a fresh cup of coffee. I will be right back, and we'll continue doing some color correction here and some depth of field on our images. I'll be back in just a couple of minutes, guys. I'll leave you with some Be Right Back music on my Be Right Back screen. I'll grab my fresh cup of coffee and I'll be back in just a few minutes. Okay. So, now this has a couple of things in the image that I do want to do some color correction on. So, let's see. Let's start with these palm tree leaves here in the corner. So let's jump in again. It's going to be hard for us to find those leaves here in our layer stack, in our color channel. So jump into the channels from layers. And that makes it easy then for you to spot where those leaves are, and they're right here. Again, make our selection here. Jump back to our RGB channel. Make sure we're on our color layer down the bottom here. Before we do that though, let's do our brightness and contrast adjustment on the image itself. So I'm just going to deselect that for a moment. Getting ahead of myself here. Remember to do it through the adjustment stack so we can turn it on and off easily. So we're going to pull up on our brightness a little bit. We'll go maybe 40 on that. And pull up on our contrast a little bit as well, just to bring in the shadows a little bit more. Let's try 35 on that. Again, I'm going to turn it off and on to compare my before with my after here. You see how it just lifts the image a little bit? You want to be careful you don't go too high because you don't want to start blowing out the white value. But it can just help to lift the image up a little. Now we're going to make a selection on those leaves here in the corner. Again, make sure you're in your color channel here. I'm going to do a Control-C to copy, and then I'm going to go Edit, Paste Special, and Paste in Place. You see the shortcut value there, Shift Control B. And let's do some adjustment on that now. Let's do let's try brightness and contrast. I'll explain that in just a second. Let me just undo that for a moment. Okay, now what I've done here is I added a brightness contrast to our overall image here at the top, and then I wanted to add another brightness contrast, but I only wanted it to affect the palm leaves themselves. Let me make that more dramatic so you can see. You see how that second brightness contrast is only affecting the palm leaves? You do that by selecting the adjustment layer, and you want to create a clipping mask. I can't create one because I've already created one, but I can release it. But to have it only affect those, whatever it is you want to affect, create a clipping mask. And you'll see that that's been created because you see a little arrow here. That indicates that it's only affecting that layer there. Nothing below it, nothing above it, just those leaves layers. So let's have a look at our brightness contrast here. Now I do want to pull these up quite high. I don't want them to look dark like they were. I really want to simulate the sun shining through those leaves. Let me turn the brightness contrast off for those leaves and compare the before and the after. And that just helps to, I wanted the look of the sunlight to be quite strong, shining through the underside of the leaf. I just felt that was too dark considering the context of the rest of the scene, because there's quite a bit of sunlight here, so those leaves would be really quite brightly lit by the sunlight. So a brightness contrast on just the leaves really helps to pull them up. What else do we have here that I want to look at? Go back into my channels. Again, the urn flowers, they're these purple flowers here in the corner. I think they're looking a little bit dark. So again, I'm going to select that layer, make a selection of that alpha map, go back to our RGB, back to our layers, back to our color layer down the bottom here, and do a Control-C for copy. And then a paste in place again. Again, I'm going to do a brightness and contrast adjustment layer. Again though, I'm going to right click on it and go create clipping mask, so it only affects those flowers there in the corner and not the rest of the image. Let's make some adjustments to those flowers. Again, I want to pull them up a bit. Just to make them a little bit more noticeable in that corner. Again, if I turn that adjustment layer off, You see they're quite dark and you lose them a little bit just by adding a slight adjustment to brightness and contrast. Just helps to lift them up a bit more. By all means, you could do an adjustment to the hue and saturation if you thought that you wanted to change the color of them. I don't, but that's an option as well. Anything else? Let's have a look at this tree in the background. I don't know if I really want to change that tree in the background, but let's go into our adjustments stack here, into our channel. Again, look for the alpha map here that is that tree, which is this one, I think. Yep. Make a selection. Back to our RGB, back into our layers, back to our color copy. Control C and paste in place again. Again, let's do a brightness contrast on that and make sure we create a clipping mask. And I just want to pull that back just a little bit, I think. Let me just turn that brightness contrast on and off and compare the two. I know it's really subtle, you may not be seeing it on the stream. I'm just darkening up that bush in the background a little bit. So in the foreground here we lightened up with palm leaves, but in this instance I want to make that bush in the background just a little bit darker. Just a touch. I want it to be less noticeable because I want these to be more of a focal point for the image. The leaves in the foreground. So we've lightened up our leaves here in the foreground. We have changed the colour here on the flowers that we can just see in the corner from the urn. Which I think are this one. Yep. And we've just made the bush in the background a little bit darker because I want that to be less of a focal point. I want the foreground to be more of the focal point. Okay, let's move on to another image. Let's go with this close-up camera. Now this one has a few more objects in the environment showing, so a few more things that we need to do some color correction on. But let's start with our Z-depth. Again, we're going to turn Z-depth on. We're going to go invert again. We're going to put our levels on our Z-depth. And again, I'm looking for a black background here. I don't want any striation, any variation, graduation in greys. I want black. That looks good. So let's do a Control A and a Control C to copy our Z depth and turn them off. We'll jump back to our color layer and we're going to go layer mask, reveal all. Jump into our channels, into our layer mask channel and Control V to copy in our Z depth. Again, we're going to make a copy of our color channel here. Whoa. I deleted it by mistake. And we're going to delete our color, our layer mask from the bottom copy. Back to our top copy with our layer mask, filter, blur, lens blur. Alright, now let's start playing with our values again. Nope, too much. You see, if we go too high, we start getting the flowers in the foreground here in sharp focus, but our angel and everything in the background starts to blur. I don't want that to be in the focus of my my image. I want her to be the focus of my image, so I'm going to start pulling it back until she comes into focus. I don't want to pull it back too far because then we're going to start to get the background coming into focus and she's going to start going out of focus. So I know I've gone too far, I'm going to start pulling up again. And something like that is good. That brings the foreground flowers slightly out of focus. She is in focus, but our dome here in the background is out of focus. Maybe I ought to pull up on the radius a little bit. Maybe a bit too much. We'll pull it back a little bit more. And again, this is a good an example again of how every image is going to be different for your depth of field for these values. So my radius here is at, let's take it to 50, which is quite high. But as you can see, it's still fine for her in the foreground. Everything is still in sharp focus because I want this part to be the focal point of my image. It started to blur the flowers in the foreground and it's blurred the dome here in the background. So that just helps to draw your eye to her and away from here. I mean, you still see the rest of the image, but when you look at the image, she's the focal point. I'm actually pull the radius back just a bit more to maybe 45. Remember, you don't want to go too nuts. I think 45 will probably work quite well. So let's say that that's our depth of field that I want. I'm going to go OK. Again, like I said, you're not going to see it when you go back because you've got to delete the layer mask. So let's do that. And now I'm just going to jump between having depth of field on and off to show you guys what it's doing a bit more clearly. So that's on, that's off, on, off. Okay. Let's do some color adjustment on some parts of the environment here. Let's start with these palm leaves here in the corner. So again, I'm going to jump into my channels so I can easily find those palm leaves, which I think will be, they are all named, but even if they weren't named, you can easily see them in your channel here. It's that one there. Back to our RGB. Actually, I've done the same thing again. Before I actually do that, I want to do a slight color adjustment, so a contrast and brightness adjustment here. Again, I'm going to pull up on the brightness a bit. Pull in the contrast a little bit, don't go too much. Like I've been telling you guys, you really want to avoid getting really black shadows anyway because it's not natural. If it's outside, you're never going to get a completely black shadow. So don't go too high to make the shadows black like that. Let's try 20 here. Again, I'm going to turn it off and on and compare the before and the after. Alright, now let's start doing some color adjustment on that palm in the corner. So we go back to our color channel. I'm going to do a Control C and then paste in place. We're going to do another brightness contrast. I'm going to make sure that I create a clipping mask so it only affects those leaves and not the rest of my image. I might just turn that off for a moment. Try throwing the levels on as well, I think. Again though, create a clipping mask. Always make sure you create a clipping mask for whatever parts of the whatever object in the scene you are changing values for, otherwise you're going to affect the entire image. Might do a hue and saturation just on those as well, I think. Again, create a clipping mask. I just want to pull back on the saturation just a little bit. Good to have you back, Sniper Echo. Yeah, I'm just pulling back on the saturation just a little bit on those leaves in the corner. So we made a copy of our leaves here using our object mask. We added a brightness and contrast to bring them up a little bit. We added the levels to differentiate the highlights from the dark shadows. And then I added a hue and saturation and did a slight desaturation on them. Let's move on to maybe the earned flowers in the background. Again, we'll go into our channels to try to find those earned flowers. It's this one here. Make a selection, jump back to our RGB, make sure we're back on our color layer here at the bottom. Control C and then do a paste in place. Same thing, we're going to start with a brightness and contrast. Always make sure you create a clipping mask. You're going for subtlety here. You don't want to go too nuts with these sliders. Turning it off and on though as you work really helps you see what you're doing. And I just wanted to brighten up those flowers here in the background a bit more. So that's off and that's on. You see it's subtle, but it'll be noticeable in the final image. Okay, let's move on to these flowers here in the corner. Go back to our channels. I think it's this one here. Back to our base color layer and do a Control C and then paste in place. Brightness contrast again. Always make sure you create a clipping mask. I'm just pulling back a bit so I can get an overall look at the render to get it in context a bit better as I make these adjustments now. Again, I just wanted to pull those flowers up a little bit more, make them a little bit more noticeable in the render. Take some of the shadow off of them. We're going to do the same thing with these ones in this corner, which will be these ones. Again, back to our base color layer, Control C and then paste in place. Again, brightness contrast, again clipping mask.